Ours is a story about beauty. A story about a search for riches within the soil beneath our feet. A story about a struggle for wealth and for survival. A story of the destruction this quest has brought to our lands, and of the sometimes tragic consequences. Ours is a story about man against nature, and a story about nature against man. Yet ours is a simple story, a story of hope. Our story unfolds within England's beautiful Peak District, Britain's first and largest national park. From the rugged dark peak moorlands to the rolling hills and hidden valleys of the White Peak, thousands journey here every year with a common aim: to enjoy the outstanding scenery and natural beauty that has become the hallmark of the national park. This diverse landscape, accessible yet challenging, rugged yet charming, has become a mecca for visitors from all walks of life. But the national park needs to be more than a playground for those who visit, or a time capsule of Middle England in our forebears' time. In order for it to survive, we must be realistic. It must continue to be a home, a place of work and a place of rest for the communities that live within it. For without them, the very essence that gives the Peak District its soul, its charm, its character would wither away. Whilst famed for its gentlemen's residences such as Chatsworth and Haddon Hall, for the picturesque market towns of Bakewell and Buxton, for the popular biker glamour of Matlock Bath, it is perhaps the outdoor life for which the Peak District National Park is best known. Within the White Peak limestones, hidden from view, lies an extensive network of caves and caverns, enticing tourists and potholers from near and far to explore the dark and beautiful spaces beneath our feet. Deep beneath the verdant hills, there exists one of the few places on Earth where original, pioneering exploration can still take place, and continued and sustained efforts by a few determined cavers are still revealing new and remarkable cave passages on a regular basis. Above ground, the gritstone crags of Stanage, Burbage and the Orchids are amongst the many venues popular with rock climbers. In the summer months, the crags resound to the jangle of climbers' metalwork as enthusiasts of all abilities revel in their sport. But the most popular and most accessible of all outdoor activities is offered by the Peak District's comprehensive network of footpaths and bridleways, providing hikers and ramblers with routes through open farmland and across heathery moors, down hidden dales and through secluded woodlands. Yet, as walkers of all ages march across the gritstone uplands and amble beside babbling brooks and through tree-lined dales, all is not what it seems. Wind the clock back and the outlook was somewhat different, for underneath the ground we tread there was a highly prized mineral to be won. Lead. And it is the search for lead and other minerals that has shaped much of the landscape we see around us. The relics of the Peak District's industrial past are strewn across its once ravaged landscape, slowly decaying and gradually fading into the natural backdrop. Throughout the peak, the legacy of ancient mineral extraction is all around us. Derelict buildings lie partly hidden amongst trees and brambles. Engine houses, miners' coves, viaducts and man-made watercourses. Open fields display the scars of many years of mining. The tips of miners' waste materials scattered across the countryside, sometimes contaminated with heavy metals and of no use for crops or grazing. Scattered across Derbyshire's windswept hillsides are literally thousands of mine shafts, sometimes several hundred feet deep. Some are easily identifiable by traditional beehives or a modern-day covering of railway sleepers. Some are less easy to spot. These are the decaying remains of our industrial heritage and part of the economic foundation for our forebears. And yet, as parts of our industrial heritage become one with the landscape, others are being rediscovered. The archaeological intrigue and sense of exploration being encouragement to those dedicated to digging open the abandoned mine workings. Not far from Wensley, it is believed that one of the old mines housed an underground water wheel, the search for which has been a long-term project for a dedicated few.
So what we're trying to do today is to get down here. We're pumping down at the bottom end to get the water level down as low as we can to about this level, and then we've got to put 3 pumps down this shaft, 2 in tandem up the shaft and 1 which we'll bring round here, plop down into this water and see if we can pump it down and sealing it, because then what we could do is we could just pump through here into here and it would run away out at the bottom, so we'd use that as a pumping level for keeping this bit dry. Oh yeah.
Oh, hang on. Green one, that smells more like turps.
That's probably diesel.
So if we could get through to the dry, there's a chance then to get into all of the Yates Stoop mine between here and the farm.
Down in the dale lie some of the remains of Mill Close Mine, once amongst the richest in Derbyshire. Here work steam engines, pumping water from deep below and belching coal fumes into the air above. The mine long since closed, increasingly little evidence of ancient mineral extraction remains on the Derbyshire hillside. Yet at the foot of the valley is the new face of Derbyshire's lead industry. The tall chimneys of Enthovens stand proud against the skyline as spent car batteries are recycled and the valuable lead within them reclaimed. Is this a blot on an otherwise unspoilt landscape? Or a vital employer and a contributor to the local economy? Is this the only way in which our demand for this hard-won metal can be sustained? The quest for lead and other minerals has left a permanent scar on our landscape. It has also left a permanent mark on the lives of some of those searching for it. While some of the features of this industrial past fade into obscurity, others, such as Magpie Mine near Sheldon, have become iconic landmarks on the exposed Derbyshire hilltops. But Magpie Mine has a sinister tale to tell.
Magpie 2010, a nice sunny day. Grey clouds hung over the mine back in the 1830s. It all resulted as a dispute between the Magpie and the red soil mines. The red soil miners sank an internal shaft or a sump 400 feet beneath where we're now standing. In effect, they intersected the Magpie mine workings. The Magpie miners warned the red soil miners that they were blasting, and if they didn't get out of the way, some of them could be injured. They didn't listen to that, and as a result, one of the red soil miners was in fact injured. Now he retaliated by taking straw down into the mine and lighting a fire. In effect, what his intentions was to smoke the Magpie miners out. Magpie retaliated. 5 o'clock Monday morning, the miners came to work here at Red Soil. As they got deeper and deeper into the mine, it was then the true extent of the hazard came to light. The fumes were causing men to collapse in the narrow passageways and fall off the stemples in the narrow climbing shafts. Now the old dispute had one hero, Critchlow Brocklehurst. He actually achieved the feat of climbing the red soil founder shaft 3 times, each time with one of the miners on his shoulder. The dispute ended with disaster really. 3 of the red soil miners lost their lives.
These were by no means the only lives lost in the search for lead. Buried in the churchyard at nearby Sheldon is the body of the young man Ephraim Brocklehurst, who fell to his death in Magpie Mine. His epitaph reads quite simply, "There is but a step between me and death." And in 1932, a tragic incident in Morstan Mine claimed the lives of 8 men, 5 of whom have been laid to rest in the churchyard at nearby Yulegrave.
Heroism unsurpassed in the history of mining was displayed by rescue workers at the Morstan lead mine at Yulegrave on Monday, when, as the result of an explosion, 8 men lost their lives. 5 men in the workings were immediately overcome by fumes, and of the rescue workers, who battled bravely against terrible conditions, with only handkerchiefs tied over their faces to protect them from the poisonous atmosphere, 3 gave their lives. Mr. K.A. Seville, the manager, sacrificed his life in his heroism and devotion to duty. At the first warning of the disaster, he descended the workings and attempted to help those who were lying helpless, until he himself was almost on the verge of collapse. After a brief respite upon the top, he went down a second time and then a third, from which he failed to return until he was found dead, lying across the bodies of 2 of the workmen. While this hitherto peaceful village has been plunged into grief, the residents are proud of the men who went down the mine, and there was no lack of volunteers in gallant attempts to rescue their fellow men.
High on the moor between Chesterfield and Matlock stands Stanage Cupola, now barely recognisable except for its lone, prominent chimney. This smelting plant was once a hive of toxic activity. Coal from the North Derbyshire coalfields was transported here to feed the furnaces, whilst valuable lead ore was brought from the mines to the south. The road sign, Belland Lane, a stark reminder of the poisonous fumes that once filled the air. Of course, the Peak District's industry was not restricted to mining. Along the banks of the Derwent and the Wye, Arkwright's mills manufactured textiles and fabrics. The spa towns of Matlock and Buxton were pioneers of Victorian tourism, and a network of trams, canals and railways provided vital transport and communications links. But it is, perhaps, mineral extraction that has had the most profound impact on the local landscape, the hills around us bearing the scars of many years of mining and quarrying, and, most visible of all, the extensive quarries from which stone has been won. At a disused gritstone quarry, young birch trees mask the hewn rock faces, and littered amongst them are the remnants of a bygone industry. Part hidden by the bracken, the abandoned millstones take on a curious new character. And much like the old gritstone quarries of the Dark Peak, the disused fluorspar quarry in White Peak's Masson Hill, now partly naturalised, has become a playground for climbing enthusiasts. Are these great gashes in the gentle hillsides, destroying the precious countryside that surrounds us, or a necessary part of life in the Peak? Essential providers of much needed stone, to build the houses in which we live, the shops within which we trade, and the factories and offices within which we work. And yet, from these once industrial sites, something remarkable springs forth. High on the hills above Matlock Bath, an area of ancient lead mining has left its mark on the land. The hillocked ground and capped mine shafts, a legacy of the ancient workings. On the undisturbed spoil heaps, with their thin covering of lime-rich soil, nature is taking matters back into her own hands. As spring arrives amongst the stony mounds of miners' spoil, the tiny white flowers of leadwort start to appear.
Yeah, leadwort's also known as spring sandwort, and it's found across the UK but very localised. And one of the sites it's quite abundant is on the old lead mine spoil heaps of Derbyshire. It's known as a plant known as a metallophyte. It's also a plant that they believe would have been used by the lead miners to help identify where lead could be found, where lead rakes were coming near the surface. They'd often find a tract of leadwort growing, and the miners knew to dig there for lead just below the surface. And it's a very delicate little white flower, probably about 10 millimetres across, with 5 petals, white petals like a little star. And these days, through modern agriculture, a lot of it has been lost, so it exists really now on a few sites like Bonsall Lees, where we've still got the old spoil heaps, where they haven't been ploughed into the ground and whatnot, haven't been lost. So from that point of view, it's a very important plant.
Buried amongst the grasses on the hillock tops lurks one of the most unusual of plants. Barely distinguishable at first, another metallophyte plant, moonwort, can be found.
Moonwort's a funny little plant, and most people when they see it are rather unimpressed with it, but it's one of those plants that again is quite scarce. It can be locally abundant, and if you go around some of the spoil heaps in Derbyshire, it is a plant that you can actually, when you look closely, find numerous specimens of. But it's quite an uninspiring little plant, closely related to ferns, sometimes only growing maybe 2 or 3 inches tall.
But for our field above Matlock, this is just the start of a remarkable botanical display. As spring turns to summer, early purple and common spotted orchids start to appear, their delicate pink and sometimes white flowers breathing colour into our landscape. Whilst the adjacent fields, agriculturally improved to provide grazing for stock, have little more than grass to display, on our ancient mines the ground becomes covered with a wonderful display of these rare and special flowers.
Well, if we look round some of the adjacent fields, you can see they're all very barren, almost green deserts, very monocultural grasslands that have been improved through agriculture, so they've been ploughed up. They've had nutrients added, fertilisers, pesticides. So you tend to be very much dominated by just coarser grasses and then a few other plant species. Sites like this have a really high diversity factor to them because of the fact that it is such nutrient poor soil. It's what they call a calcareous grassland. So you've got plants on here typical of calcareous grasslands, a lot of orchid species. I believe there's probably about 10 or 12 orchid species on this site. You'll get flowers like grass of Parnassus, which is a very delicate little late summer flowering plant. And then we've got the metallophyte species, which are associated with actual spoil heaps themselves. So plants like leadwort, moonwort, alpine pennycress, and the mountain pansies, of course, which are beautiful upon this site.
A nearby abandoned mine, now restored by a group of enthusiasts, plays host to an even more surprising display. For amongst the mining remains, on the old powder house roof, a colony of orchids seems not to just survive, but to thrive in the shallow earth that has accumulated on the corrugated tin roof. From the remains of a search for lead ore to a colourful pageant of orchids. Back at the orchid field, our display of common spotted orchids is just the start of an extraordinary botanical bonanza.
Because it's got such a massive diversity of flower species on it, and it's very rich in flower life as well, not just the diversity but the number of plants. You can come up in the late spring and summer and it's just an absolute wash of different orchid species. It's probably one of the best sites I know for plants like pyramidal and fragrant orchid. And then occasionally you'll find frog orchids and fly orchids, again which aren't species that are very particularly abundant in the county. A lot of the old lead mine sites in Derbyshire were lost by levelling. A lot of that would have been down to the fact availability of machinery to do the work. You know, there's a lot of earth moving to do to level a field to make it suitable for ploughing and harrowing. And maybe on these fields, just the sheer number of shafts would have made that difficult as well. There would have had to be a lot of infilling to make it safe. Some ploughing out sort of some of the larger spoil heaps would have been very difficult. And hence the fact that this site has escaped from modern intensive agriculture means that it still maintains a high diversity of flora. Bee orchids belong to the Apharis family of orchids, and they do occur in various different forms. I believe you get the common form of bee orchid on here, but the variant that you get growing up here is the flavescens form, which has sort of white sepals on it. Yeah, they are quite rare. You come across them every now and again. It's the only site I've seen them in Derbyshire. I'm sure they do occur at other sites. And we do occasionally get chlorantha form as well in some other sites in the county. But this is the best site I know of for finding the flavescens bee orchids.
As the 21st century forges on, the pressure on our natural resources becomes ever more great. As long as our society is hungry for new houses and shops, for metals, for fuel, the search for and extraction of minerals will continue. And today it does so on a scale never witnessed before. 300 years ago, the miners would work with little more than hand tools. Rates of extraction were low, and the minerals were hard won. Whilst there was a marked effect on the local environment, it was gradual. Today, the mechanical excavator is king, tearing apart our hills at an unprecedented rate. Perhaps unlike the mining of previous generations, the scale of modern-day extraction forces an awareness of our impact on the landscape, and today we have the power to act on our knowledge. Opinion is, however, divided.
My name is Clint White. I'm the Mines and Technical Services Manager with Glebe Mines Limited, based at Cavendish Mill.
My name's Phil Chambers and I'm a member of Save Wensley Hillside.
I have responsibility for ore supply to Cavendish Mill, which includes the quarry operations and also the underground mining operations.
The group got going primarily to obviously oppose the development of Tearsall Quarry and the land behind us. So as a group that want to keep the Peat Park as it is, although not necessarily pickled in aspic, but certainly to avoid lots of wanton destruction and extraction over a considerable area of the park.
In terms of resources, I think there are still millions of tonnes of fluorspar in the Peak District. we are going to be constrained in how much we can extract for various reasons. The biggest single issue, I think, is planning.
We've put a lot of time and effort into trying to garner support and stir people up into writing to the Peak Park to express their own views and gain as much support as we can. And it's dragged on for so long. 1 minute we are sort of teased, really, thinking, oh, we're almost there, and over the years we've had some successes with various applications that have gone in, and we were hoping that because this was going to be a major development, that the park would stand by its policies and it would get voted down.
This is bow rake and high rake, and it's an east-west structure on Longston Edge. It's been the main source of ore for Cavendish Mill, certainly for the last 10 years. And we're looking now at the bow rake side on the right, which has been worked out, and the high rake vein splits from the bow rake vein to the left of us. And our plans are to continue to extract the high rake vein until we exhaust it.
It's amazing that a site like this, and a relatively, well, in terms of quarry development, or it's a major development for this site, that a whole industry and thousands of people, or hundreds of people, I should say, and millions of pounds worth of income all hinge on one particular application.
We start off by trying to evaluate what the reserve will be in a site. We can only do that on the basis of the drilling information that we get.
We certainly don't want to be sat here in a few years, or stood here in a few years' time, going through the same process and saying the same things that we did at the last planning meeting and the planning meeting before that.
The economics in the 1960s and 70s were much different because there was plentiful high-grade material around that they would not do very much in terms of development in the pits. Now it's becoming more difficult to get. Then the economics have changed to allow us to get that material.
We've never actually stood for objecting to mining per se, because what we wanted was certainly to protect this hillside and the beautiful landscape here. But if the ore can be extracted from underground mining, then that's what we want.
The underground mine is really constrained by minimum widths of the mineral, and underground mine recovery is not as good. It is more expensive, and it also limits the type of material that you can extract.
We felt it was economics. Obviously it's easier to rip it out of here than it is to do something more complex and expensive and go underground for it.
Within the open pits, with the type of machines that we have here, and the bulk extraction method means that we can take even narrow little stringers, so a very, very narrow, centimetres wide material. All of the fines that are generated during the drilling and blasting process can be used to be blended with the high grade material, so recoveries are approaching 100%.
We appreciate that obviously fluorspar is basically only found in the North Pennines and here, and whilst there is a need for it, I dispute that there's a national need.
There are deposits of fluorspar elsewhere. These are limited really to the Northern Pennines, where there has been some historical production, but there are no processing facilities in the Northern Pennines.
Because it's a finite mineral anyway, once it's gone, it's gone.
I think the future will be really to increase what we can get from underground. I firmly believe that the only economic deposits within the UK are located, unfortunately, in the Peak District National Park. In the immediate foreground here, we've an area that was restored and completed back in 1998, and that was soiled over and grassed up very quickly and restored back to agriculture. In the middle distance, we can see an area that still looks as if it's awaiting some soil cover to be applied. We're approaching that in a much different way. What they're trying to do there is to encourage more diverse grass species and calcareous grassland to develop, and so they've restricted the amount of soil cover that we've allowed there. We're trying to generate soil cover using limestone dust from the quarry and small areas of tailings from the Cavendish Mill operations. The seeding rate there is much lower than you would normally use on a site, and we are not putting any fertiliser on there at all, and that's really to restrict the development of your normal and very aggressive common grass species and allow the development of more diverse and rare species of grass.
Restoration plans always sound good. It's the proof of the pudding, of course, is in the eating, and actually what the site will look like at, when push comes to shove. We've been here certainly with previous operators and applications where the restoration plans have been sought to change throughout the subsequent periods. So on the whole, it was a good plan, but then again, why disturb it to start with?
The authority take a much longer view in terms of how these things are restored, because they're concerned about what it's going to look like in 50 or maybe 100 years, as opposed to something that goes green very quickly and has a much lower visual impact in the short term. It's hard to improve on nature, but there are certain things that we do try and achieve with that final restoration. So.
As mankind continues the search for the minerals on which we have become dependent, the sustainability of our ongoing quest becomes questionable. For how long can we maintain this relentless exploitation of our natural resources, and what legacy is being left by our actions? We cannot know for how long the current rates of mineral extraction can be maintained, but we do know that this cannot be forever. And as for the legacy that our hunger for resources is leaving behind us, a nearby limestone quarry abandoned just 50 years ago. Nothing compared with the scale of the current operations near Buxton, but immense compared to the mine workings of centuries ago. Here the old quarry machinery crumbles away, fading back into the ground from which it once came. And as it does so, nature gradually makes a new home in this stark, stony environment. For on the quarry floor and the fragile quarry edges, undisturbed by humans or grazing, a new display of biodiversity has found a home. For this, now, is an area that is no longer touched by humans. The stark warning signs, the unknown protectors of a new generation of wildlife. In the piles of rubble, the last remains of the quarrymen's buildings, a solitary evening primrose ekes out an existence. And amongst the rusting remains of an abandoned vehicles, summer's first orchids start to blossom. Whether mining and quarrying in the Peak is viewed as an essential part of modern life, as an age-old industry that has always been an intrinsic part of our community, whether it's viewed as a blot on the landscape, raping the countryside of its very essence, or as an important part of the local economy, for the foreseeable future it will continue. Whoever we are, whatever our views, for our orchids at least, there is perhaps a small glimmer of hope.